In the quiet of the night, Avery heard a sound that chilled her to the bone, a faint whisper from above. For months, unexplained noises and misplaced items had plagued her home, leading her to doubt her own sanity. But nothing could prepare her for the sight of her ex, whom she hadn't seen in over a decade, perched in the shadows of her attic. His first words to her were not of apology or fear, but a chilling revelation that turned her blood cold. Avery froze, and she lost her balance as she stumbled back, away from her ex, who looked like he had just come out of a horror movie. "What are you doing here?" she screamed in fear, and when she heard his reply, she practically jumped down the attic ladder, wanting to get away from him as quickly as possible. She hurried to grab her phone, thinking she needed to call 911 immediately, but she couldn't find it anywhere. Instead, she heard the attic ladder creaking, and she realized that it was Tom. He was coming after her. She took a deep breath as she looked around the room, looking for the best place to hide, and she then decided to lock herself in the pantry. Avery sat in the dark, holding her breath so as to not make any noise, and she listened to Tom's footsteps that were getting louder and louder. He was standing next to the door now. She prayed that he would not find her. But what was Tom even doing in her house? Why had he been hiding there? And what did he want from her? And what did he say to her when she found him? She didn't dare to make any movement at all because he would definitely hear her. And she didn't even want to think about what would happen after that. She couldn't believe that he had come for her, she thought, as she stared into the darkness that surrounded her, hoping Tom would move away from the damn pantry. After a while, it was completely silent, and she didn't even hear his footsteps anymore. Had he left? Very, very slowly, Avery opened the pantry door just the slightest bit, only enough to peek through the opening. There was no sign of Tom, and after checking the rest of the house, she realized that he had gone. She was finally able to let the reality of the situation sink in, and she fell down on a chair as she burst into tears. This couldn't be happening. How did he even find her? Tom's words echoed in Avery's mind as she poured a glass of water with trembling hands. "They're coming for you, Avery," he had said with a grave expression, and she knew he was telling the truth. She downed the water in one gulp, angrily wiping away tears. All this time, she thought she had escaped, but it seemed her past was catching up with her after all. It had been too good to be true anyway. Surely, it was Tom's fault. He probably had something to do with it all, she thought. How could he? And what had he even been doing in her attic in the first place? She ran upstairs and hurried up the attic stairs, realizing that she hadn't been up there in a very long time. And as she looked around, she realized that not coming up there had been a grave mistake. It was obvious that someone had been living here for quite some time, and that someone was Tom, her ex-husband. She went through his things and hoped she would find anything that would give her answers, for she had so many questions. Why was he staying in her attic? And who exactly was coming for her? His words. Were they a warning or a threat? Avery took a few deep breaths, grappling with the realization that Tom had been living right here in her house all these years. She had believed she was safe, that she had escaped, but her sense of security had been an illusion. This was never supposed to happen. She jolted upright as she realized she needed to find Tom. If the others found out where she lived, she was in danger. She went to her office and grabbed a little notebook from the back of her bottom drawer. She stared at the number that was written on there and wondered whether she should call it or not. In all those years, she had never considered doing so even once. But now, she really wasn't sure. She hadn't been prepared for this situation, and she had no idea how to handle it. Avery decided to call the number, her heart pounding as she dialed, unsure of what to expect. Her fingers trembled, and she had to take a deep breath to steady herself. She had no idea who would be on the other end, or if they would even answer. The phone felt heavy in her hand, a lifeline to some kind of answer. She closed her eyes, hoping this was the right move. She listened anxiously to the beeps, each one increasing her fear that the number might no longer be in use. Each beep echoed in her ears, a reminder of how long it had been since she last used this number. What if it had been disconnected? Her pulse quickened with each passing second. She counted the rings, her nerves fraying with every one, until she almost gave up hope. Finally, someone picked up, but remained silent, causing Avery to momentarily doubt herself. She could hear faint breathing on the other end, but no words. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The silence stretched on, tension mounting between them. Avery's grip tightened on the phone. Was this the right person? She cleared her throat, trying to gather her courage, and prepared to speak again. She steadied her voice and said, "One blue moon, please," hoping the old code still held meaning. The silence on the other end felt suffocating, every second dragging out painfully. She held her breath, waiting for a response, praying she hadn't made a mistake. The words felt foreign on her tongue, a relic of a past she hoped to forget. She gripped the phone, her knuckles white, waiting for any sign. The line remained silent for a moment longer before a faint voice responded, confirming she had reached the right person. "Who is this?" the voice asked, barely above a whisper. Relief washed over Avery, but the fear didn't entirely dissipate. "A friend," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. The voice on the other end hesitated, then spoke again. "Why now?" Avery took a deep breath, knowing she had to choose her next words carefully. The person on the phone paused, then finally said, "Meet me at the red corner in 2 hours." Avery's heart raced as she noted the location. She could hear the urgency in their voice. "I'll be there," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. The line went dead, leaving her in silence once more. She had 2 hours to prepare, 2 hours to face whatever awaited her. Relief washed over Avery, but she knew she couldn't fully relax, still wary of who she was dealing with. She paced the room, her mind racing with possibilities. Who was this person? Could she really trust them? She shook her head, knowing she had no choice. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. She had to be cautious, every step filled with uncertainty and fear. She quickly gathered her essentials, preparing for the meeting. Aware that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, Avery grabbed a small bag and stuffed it with items she thought she might need: phone, charger, wallet, keys, and a flashlight. She paused, considering what else could be crucial. Her mind raced with thoughts, but she forced herself to stay focused. There was no room for error now. Avery double-checked her surroundings, ensuring she wasn't being watched or followed. She peeked through the curtains, scanning the street for any unusual activity. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked around, but everything seemed normal. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She needed to be careful. Every move counted. Leaving her house, she made her way to the location, each step filled with a mixture of hope and dread. The streets were eerily quiet, and every sound made her jump. She kept her head down, trying to blend in with the shadows. The red corner was just a few blocks away, but it felt like miles. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Arriving at the red corner, Avery scanned the area, looking for any sign of the person she was supposed to meet. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the air was thick with tension. She checked her watch, noting she was right on time. Her eyes darted around, searching for a familiar face or a signal. Every sound made her jump, and she kept her hand close to her bag, ready for anything. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see a hooded figure stepping out of the shadows. Avery's heart skipped a beat, and she took a step back, her eyes wide with caution. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, and she tensed, preparing for the worst. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her fear. The figure paused, then lowered the hood, revealing a face she hadn't seen in years. "Avery, it's been a long time," the figure said, revealing a familiar face from her past. She gasped, recognizing the voice immediately. "Jack?" she whispered, hardly believing her eyes. Memories flooded back, and she felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Jack had been a close ally once, but seeing him here, now, was unexpected. She tried to read his expression, searching for clues in his eyes. She recognized the person as Jack, a former ally who used to work with her, who had also disappeared years ago. They used to be spies for an important organization, but they stopped when their team went rogue. "What are you doing here?" Avery asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jack sighed, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "We need to talk, Avery. It's about the team. They're looking for you." Jack quickly briefed her on the situation, explaining that their rogue team had been hunting for her. "They think you have something they need," he said urgently. Avery's mind raced, trying to piece everything together. "Why now? After all this time?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. Jack shook his head, looking grim. "I don't know, but we have to move fast. You're in more danger than you realize." Avery listened intently as Jack detailed the rogue team's activities, realizing the danger she was in. "They've been tracking you for months," he explained, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "They want something you have, but I'm not sure what." Avery's mind raced, trying to recall anything that could be of value to them. She nodded, absorbing every word, her fear growing with each revelation. This was more serious than she thought. He handed her a file, containing information on the team's recent movements and objectives. Avery opened it, her eyes scanning the documents quickly. Photos, maps, and handwritten notes filled the pages. "This is everything I've gathered," Jack said, his voice urgent. "They're organized and determined. You need to be careful." Avery nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This was her lifeline, her key to survival. "You need to stay hidden and plan your next steps carefully," Jack advised, his tone serious. Avery looked up from the file, meeting his gaze. "Where should I go?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. Jack shook his head. "I can't tell you that. You'll have to figure it out on your own. Just stay off the grid." Avery swallowed hard, knowing she had no choice but to trust his judgment. Avery thanked him, feeling a mix of gratitude and unease about their sudden reunion. "I never expected to see you again," she admitted, her voice soft. Jack gave a small, sad smile. "Neither did I, but here we are." The weight of their past hung between them, unspoken but felt. "Be safe, Avery," Jack said, squeezing her hand briefly before stepping back into the shadows. She watched him go, feeling a pang of sadness. She left the meeting with a renewed sense of urgency, knowing she had to act quickly to stay ahead of her pursuers. The streets seemed even darker now, each shadow a potential threat. Avery clutched the file to her chest, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. She couldn't afford to waste any time. She had to disappear, and she had to do it now. Her survival depended on it. Back at her house, Avery spread the contents of the file across her table, absorbing every detail. She examined the photos, read through the notes, and tried to make sense of the maps. Each piece of information added a new layer to the puzzle. She couldn't believe how much Jack had uncovered. The more she read, the more the picture became clear. Her mind raced with possibilities and plans. She discovered that Tom had been in contact with the rogue team, feeding them information about her whereabouts. Avery's hands trembled as she read the incriminating messages and notes. She felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over her. How could he do this to her? Her thoughts spiraled, remembering the times they had shared. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing he had been working against her. Shocked and betrayed, she realized Tom's involvement was deeper than she initially thought. He hadn't just been spying on her. He had been an active participant in the rogue team's plans. Avery clenched her fists, trying to control her rage. She needed to know why. What had driven him to this? The betrayal cut deep, but she couldn't let it paralyze her. She had to confront him and find out the truth. Avery knew she had to confront Tom to get more answers and understand his motives. She couldn't move forward without knowing the full story. With a determined look, she packed a few essentials and prepared to leave. Her mind was set. She needed to see him face to face. She couldn't afford any more surprises. It was time to get to the bottom of this and finally understand his actions. Preparing herself mentally and physically, she set out to find Tom and demand the truth. Avery took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. She double-checked her bag, ensuring she had everything she might need. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. She knew this confrontation could go in many directions, but she was ready for whatever came next. With one last look around her house, she stepped out into the night. Avery tracked Tom to an old safe house they used during their spy days, a place filled with memories. The building was tucked away in a quiet part of town, almost forgotten. She remembered the countless nights they had spent here, planning missions and sharing secrets. Now, it was the stage for their confrontation. Avery took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She approached the safe house cautiously, aware of the potential danger awaiting her. Every step was measured, her senses on high alert. The area was quiet, almost too quiet, and it made her uneasy. She scanned the surroundings, looking for any signs of movement or traps. The memories of this place contrasted sharply with the reality of her current mission. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Inside, she found Tom, who looked startled but not entirely surprised to see her. He stood up from an old wooden chair, his expression a mix of guilt and resignation. "Avery," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. The tension in the room was palpable. Avery's heart pounded as she took a step closer, the need for answers driving her forward. She clenched her fists, ready for the confrontation. "Why, Tom? Why did you betray me?" Avery asked, her voice a mix of anger and hurt. The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Tom looked down, avoiding her gaze. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he murmured. Avery's anger flared. "Then why? What could possibly make you do this?" she demanded, her voice rising. She needed to understand, even if the truth was painful. Tom sighed, explaining that he had no choice, and that the rogue team had threatened his life if he didn't cooperate. "They came after me first, Avery," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I tried to resist, but they made it clear they wouldn't hesitate to kill me. I thought I could protect you if I played along." His eyes finally met hers, pleading for understanding. Tom revealed that the rogue team was after sensitive information that Avery possessed, information only she knew. "They believe you have the key to something vital," he said, eyes pleading for her to understand. Avery's mind raced, trying to recall what information she might have that was so valuable. She felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever it was, it had put her life in danger, and now she needed to remember. He explained that his time in the attic was both a way to protect her and to keep an eye on her movements. "I wanted to make sure you were safe," Tom said, his voice barely a whisper. "Being close was the only way I could think of." Avery's emotions were a whirlwind. Could she trust him? His words sounded sincere, but the betrayal still stung deeply. She had to stay focused. Avery felt a mix of emotions, struggling to discern the truth from his explanations. Her mind was a jumble of thoughts and memories, trying to piece together the puzzle. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she asked, her voice cracking. Tom looked at her with sad eyes. "I thought I could handle it on my own," he said. "I was wrong." Avery's heart ached, but she knew they had to move forward. Despite his betrayal, Tom insisted he still cared for her and wanted to help her escape. "Avery, I never stopped caring," he said, taking a step closer. "I want to make things right. Let me help you." Avery stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deceit. She saw the sincerity in his eyes and felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn this situation around. Avery decided to take a calculated risk, agreeing to work with Tom to outsmart the rogue team. "All right," she said, taking a deep breath. "We'll do this together, but one wrong move, and we're done." Tom nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Trust was fragile, but necessity forced them to work as a team. They had to outsmart the rogue team before it was too late. Avery and Tom devised a plan to lure the rogue team into a trap, using the information as bait. They huddled over a map, marking key points and discussing strategies. "We'll need to be precise," Tom said, pointing to a secluded area. Avery nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. They outlined every step, knowing there was no room for error. The plan was risky, but it was their best shot. They gathered old resources and contacted a few trusted allies, forming a small but determined group. Avery reached out to former colleagues, explaining the urgency of the situation. Some were hesitant, but most agreed to help. "We've been through worse," one ally said, gripping Avery's shoulder. With weapons, gadgets, and a solid team, they felt more prepared. The reunion was bittersweet, a reminder of their shared past and uncertain future. The plan was set in motion, with Avery and Tom carefully orchestrating every detail to ensure their success. They communicated in hushed tones, reviewing each aspect repeatedly. "Timing is everything," Tom reminded everyone. The group dispersed, taking their positions and making final preparations. Avery double-checked their gear, her heart pounding. She exchanged a look with Tom, both knowing what was at stake. This had to work. Failure wasn't an option. They chose an isolated location for the ambush, hoping to catch the rogue team off guard. The spot was perfect, remote, with plenty of cover. Avery and Tom arrived early, setting up traps and hiding spots. The atmosphere was tense, every rustle of leaves heightening their senses. "This place brings back memories," Tom said quietly. Avery nodded, feeling a mix of nostalgia and apprehension. They were ready, but the waiting was the hardest part. As the day of the confrontation approached, Avery felt a mixture of fear and determination, ready to face her past. She spent the night going over the plan again, unable to sleep. The weight of the upcoming battle pressed down on her, but she knew she had to stay strong. Tom tried to offer reassurance, but his own anxiety was evident. Together, they steeled themselves for the challenge ahead, knowing the endgame was near. The rogue team arrived at the designated location, unaware of the trap awaiting them. Their movements were cautious but confident, believing they had the upper hand. Avery watched from her hidden spot, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She exchanged a glance with Tom, both silently confirming they were ready. The rogue agents spread out, scanning the area for any signs of Avery. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Avery and her allies watched from their hidden positions, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every sound seemed amplified in the stillness of the isolated location. Avery could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her breath steady but shallow. She kept her eyes on the rogue team, tracking their movements carefully. The tension was almost unbearable, but they had to be patient. Timing was everything. The tension was palpable as the rogue team began to search for Avery, their impatience growing. They moved with increasing frustration, their voices low and tense. "Where is she?" one of them muttered, clearly agitated. Avery held her breath, knowing the time was near. She could see the irritation in their faces, the way they started to make mistakes. It was almost time to act. They just needed the right moment. At the signal, Avery and her team launched their ambush, catching the rogue agents by surprise. They sprang from their hiding spots with precision, executing their plan flawlessly. The rogue team barely had time to react before they were surrounded. "Now!" Avery shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her allies moved swiftly, disarming and incapacitating their opponents. The element of surprise was on their side, and they used it to full effect. A fierce battle ensued, but Avery's side had the advantage of preparation and determination. The rogue agents fought back fiercely, but they were disoriented and outmatched. Avery moved with purpose, her training kicking in as she engaged the enemy. She could see her allies holding their ground, their faces set with determination. The sounds of combat filled the air, but Avery's focus was unshakable. They had to win this. Amidst the chaos, Avery confronted the leader of the rogue team, demanding answers about their relentless pursuit. She cornered him against a wall, her eyes blazing with determination. "Why are you after me?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. The leader smirked, a sinister glint in his eyes. "You really don't know, do you?" he said mockingly. Avery's grip tightened on her weapon, ready for whatever he would reveal. The leader revealed their ultimate goal, a piece of information that could expose a massive conspiracy. "It's all about the files you possess," he confessed, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "That information can bring down some very powerful people." Avery's heart skipped a beat as the weight of his words sank in. The conspiracy was larger than she had ever imagined, and she was right in the middle of it. Avery realized the gravity of the situation, understanding that this information could change everything. She glanced around at the ongoing battle, her mind racing. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about uncovering a truth that could impact countless lives. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She knew she had to protect the information, no matter the cost. The stakes were higher than ever. Despite the leader's attempts to sway her, Avery stood firm, determined to protect the information at all costs. "You won't get it," she declared, her voice steady. The leader's expression shifted to one of frustration. "You don't know what you're up against," he warned, but Avery was unyielding. "I know enough," she replied. She wasn't going to let them manipulate her. The truth had to come out, and she was ready to fight for it. The rogue team was eventually subdued, but Avery knew this was only the beginning of a larger fight. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the conspiracy was far from over. She looked around at her allies, their faces reflecting the same determination she felt. They had won this battle, but the war was still ahead. Avery took a deep breath, preparing herself for the challenges to come. The fight for the truth had only just begun. With the immediate threat neutralized, Avery and her allies regrouped to plan their next steps. They gathered in a secure location, exhaustion evident on their faces, but determination burning in their eyes. Avery laid out the documents they had recovered, the weight of their importance pressing down on her. "We need a strategy," she said, her voice calm but firm. They all knew that the real battle was just beginning. She shared the critical information with her team, explaining its significance and the potential fallout. "This isn't just about us," Avery said, pointing to the key points in the documents. "It's about exposing the truth and holding those responsible accountable." The room was silent as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. Each member of the team understood the risks, but they also knew the importance of their mission. Avery decided to go public with the information, believing transparency was the best way to neutralize the conspiracy. "We can't keep this hidden," she said, looking around at her team. "The only way to stop them is to shine a light on their actions." There were murmurs of agreement. It was a dangerous move, but it was their best shot at dismantling the corrupt network they had uncovered. Her team supported her decision, preparing to face the repercussions of their actions. "We're with you, Avery," Tom said, his voice resolute. The others nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They began organizing the evidence, making sure everything was clear and irrefutable. They knew they would face backlash, but they were ready. The truth had to come out, and they would stand together to make sure it did. They contacted a trusted journalist, setting the stage for a major revelation that would shake the foundations of power. "We have something big," Avery told the journalist over the phone. "Meet us tonight. You won't believe what we've uncovered." The journalist agreed, sensing the urgency in Avery's voice. The team knew this was their chance to make a difference. They prepared the documents, ready to reveal the truth to the world. The information was released, causing a media frenzy and prompting investigations into the conspiracy. News outlets exploded with headlines, and reporters swarmed to cover the breaking story. Avery and her allies watched the coverage, their efforts finally paying off. The public demanded answers, and officials scrambled to respond. Avery felt a mix of relief and anxiety, knowing this was just the beginning of a long battle for justice. Avery and her allies stayed vigilant, knowing the exposure would make them targets once again. They took extra precautions, constantly watching their surroundings. "We can't let our guard down," Tom reminded everyone. They communicated through secure channels and stayed in safe houses, ready for any retaliation. The stakes were higher than ever, but their resolve remained unbroken. They had come this far, and they weren't going to back down now. Despite the danger, Avery felt a sense of liberation, having taken control of her fate and acted for the greater good. She stood by the window, watching the city bustle below. "We did the right thing," she said softly to Tom. He nodded, a proud smile on his face. The weight of secrets had been lifted, and Avery felt a newfound clarity. She knew the road ahead would be tough, but she was ready. Tom, now fully redeemed in Avery's eyes, vowed to stay by her side and help her navigate the challenges ahead. "We're in this together," he promised, taking her hand. Avery looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Tom," she said, squeezing his hand. They had faced betrayal, danger, and uncertainty, but their bond was stronger than ever. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The story ended with Avery finding a new sense of purpose, ready to face whatever came next, with courage and resilience. She looked at her team, feeling a surge of hope. They had exposed the truth, and sparked change. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice filled with determination. As they planned their next moves, Avery knew they were prepared for the future. United, they could take on anything.